Emma and I were just settling into our routine after installing solar panels on our suburban home. After 5 years of saving and planning, we finally made the leap into renewable energy to both reduce our carbon footprint and lower those skyrocketing electricity bills. It was a dream come true, until our neighbor Karen entered the scene. I've heard stories about that kind of neighbor, the type who complains about everything from children playing too loudly to grass that's half an inch taller than it should be. But we managed to avoid Karen's radar until the installation day. The morning after our solar panels were finished, I opened my door to find her standing there, clad in a bathrobe, visibly fuming. "Those hideous things need to go," she screamed, pointing angrily at our sleek solar panels soaking up the morning sun. I tried to reason with her, explaining how the panels worked, how they absorbed sunlight, not reflected it, and even told her about the HOA's approval. But Karen wouldn't have any of it. She threatened to sue us, claiming our solar panels were ruining her property values and killing her garden. As the days trudged on, Karen's campaign of harassment escalated. She began filing complaints with the HOA almost daily, donning the role of a vigilante with a camera, documenting what she saw as our crimes. I tried to stay calm. I even sent a certified letter asking her to stop, and bizarrely, the HOA board supported us, reminding her our installation had been approved. But it wasn't enough. One quiet Saturday morning, I awoke to the sound of shattering glass. I raced outside only to find Karen on our roof, hammer in hand, smashing our once gleaming solar panels. "Taking back my sunlight," she shouted, wild-eyed and manic as she brought the hammer down on yet another panel. Shocked, I recorded the madness as I called the police. With sirens blaring, they arrived just in time to find her mid-rampage. She was arrested, still yelling about her stolen sunlight, while my heart raced at the sight of the destruction she'd caused. 5 panels were shattered, and our roof now bore the scars of her lunacy. The repairs were estimated at over $112,000, a financial burden that felt crippling. As Karen was charged with criminal vandalism and trespassing, a storm of emotions brewed within me. This was no longer just a neighborly dispute. It felt like our lives were in turmoil. Refusing to be bullied, we took Karen to court, filing for damages and emotional distress. But her lawyer, armed with a bag filled with absurd arguments, seemed to think we were the culprits. They claimed ancient rights to sunlight and even attempted to associate our solar panels with a conspiracy. I was stunned. Was this really happening? The courtroom proved to be a battlefield, as we presented evidence, security footage, witness testimonials, and emails. It felt like a high-stakes game, and we needed to win. But then, the trial took an unexpected turn when Karen took the stand. She launched into a bizarre tirade about solar panels and conspiracies, claiming our installation had disrupted the balance of nature. Listening to her, I felt a mix of pity and frustration. Who was this woman really? The judge seemed unfazed by Karen's antics as he passed a ruling that felt like justice. She owed us over $122,000. But as I left the courtroom, I felt a strange sense of dread. That victory felt flimsy. What if she refused to pay? What if this battle wasn't truly over? Little did I know, this was just the beginning. Chapter 2, The Fallout. After the judge's decision, our lives were still in upheaval. Karen's refusal to pay the damages hung ominously over us like a dark cloud. I spent countless nights tossing and turning, worrying about her next move. Hadn't we dealt with enough? But her persistence only fueled my determination. Within those first few weeks, we discovered that Karen had inherited her home outright from her parents. Her attempts to hide her assets began to unravel, and the judge wasn't amused. My heart raced as I recalled the satisfaction in my lawyer's eyes when she filed for a lien on Karen's house. With every passing day, it seemed like we were steps closer to justice. Just when I thought the case was winding down, anticipation shot through me. Karen's house was now under the eyes of the law. Her every move had consequences. But my heart sank when I realized how this impacted our lives. She still wasn't going to let us be free of her. A few months later, while sitting down to dinner with Emma, my phone buzzed with an ominous notification. It was an email from our lawyer. Karen was trying to play the victim once again, spinning tales to the media about how we had destroyed her peaceful living environment. The nerve! My blood boiled at the thought of her trying to twist the narrative. But we kept our heads up and watched as the community rallied in support of us. Even the local news picked up our story, an example of how absurd it was to blame solar power for life's inconveniences. I had no idea then that this was just the tippy tip of the iceberg. One fateful morning, I opened a letter from a solar advocacy group. They were interested in our story. I couldn't contain my laughter. Stolen sunlight, as Karen had so uniquely put it, had become synonymous with our fight, and now, our case was becoming a cautionary tale for others wrestling with similar disputes. But the unfolding drama reached a climax one Saturday evening. We received a call from our lawyer. Karen had moved but wasn't done yet. A new round of harassment was about to begin, but this time, I was ready. As Emma and I shared a knowing nod, we realized just how far we were willing to go for our right to harness the sun. As time passed, we turned our energy toward community building rather than bitterness. We organized a gathering to discuss the benefits of solar energy, inviting other homeowners to learn from our journey and to welcome them into the world we now could trust. But the sun was about to shine a little bit sweeter in our lives. What I didn't know, as I looked at the repaired panels glistening on our roof, was that the fight wasn't over just yet. With every neighbor who joined our cause, I felt a warm glow of hope. Perhaps standing my ground would not just mean victory for us but for everyone facing their own Karen. Chapter 3. The Ripple Effect. As the neighborhood began to rally around our shared goal of environmental awareness, I couldn't help but feel a newfound dignity in our story spreading like wildfire. Other houses were getting solar panels, one by one, emboldened by our willingness to contest injustice. Each installation blossomed under the sun, and with it, a sense of community invigorated our street. But as the positivity grew, so did Karen's infamous legacy, weaving a tale far beyond our immediate neighborhood. I soon found out our case had gained traction in the local legal community. They even invited me to share our experience at the beginning of renewable energy seminars. While preparing to address a room full of eager learners, I reflected on the absurdity of it all. Here I was speaking up against darkness, against immaturity dressed up in legal jargon, and somehow, I was actually making a difference. That day, as I stepped onto the stage, a flutter of anxiety swept over me, quickly dissipated by the encouraging smiles in the audience. I recounted our experience with Karen, the emotional roller coaster, and the lessons learned along the way. What surprised me most was the thunderous applause at the end. That standing ovation felt like a victory, a closure I never expected. But the story took another twist when, of all things, I received a phone call from a local news reporter who wanted to cover the success of our story. My heart raced as I realized we could turn this saga into something even bigger, an opportunity to uplift others who might feel trapped like we once were. The call came just after I decided it was time to invest in tightening security around our house. Those cameras weren't just an investment in our peace of mind, they represented our newfound defiance. You can't steal our light, I thought, chuckling to myself as I made the call to install a state-of-the-art system. But amidst all this blossoming change, I waited for Karen's next move. The tension thickened with each passing day. Would she really accept her punishment? Would she merely bide her time for a chance to strike again? As the next chapter of our fight begun, I knew our resolve was greater than Karen's antics. When challenged, we had come together, lighting the path forward. I held on to hope that maybe, just maybe, her erratic efforts would amplify, not hinder, our mission, and empower countless others to stand up for their right to the sun. Weeks later, Karen's fate struck a chord in the gossiping tongues of our neighborhood when the news broke. She'd sold her house, attempting to escape the looming ramifications of her actions. Her next stop, a little rural town with no HOA, an escape plan cleverly put into place, or so she thought. But the shadow she cast over our lives had an unexpected consequence. Little did she know, the ripple effect of transparency and community empowerment had echoed far beyond her reach. Fully aware of her antics, her new neighbors were not as naive as we had been when she roamed free. With rumors swirling about her antics reaching the ears of the new townsfolk, it was only a matter of time before Karen would try to lash out again. And when she did, I couldn't help but feel a surge of confidence. If she couldn't respect the rights of others and learn from her mistakes, then she truly had not anticipated the strength of collective enlightenment. As I dedicated more time to speaking about solar energy rights and neighborly support, I found myself on a path of clarity. Each day we grew our little movement in the neighborhood, and soon enough, Karen's infamy faded out while the community's spirit shone brighter. Without even realizing it, we began to change perceptions. Each time I spotted solar panels going up on homes nearby, my heart swelled with pride. Perhaps Karen and her stolen sunlight should serve as a reminder. One could only invoke shadows for so long before the light returned and laid claim to the land. Eventually, I stood at the helm of a sunrise that spelled justice, growth, and change. A testament to resilience and strength in a world where darkness loomed, offering light to every corner where fear had previously taken hold. With each new panel installed, a story was born, an unbreakable thread of community woven through shared struggles against a common foe, and the awakening of a new chapter, all driven by the sun's unwavering presence. Maybe, I joked with Emma one afternoon, gazing at the bright solar panels, we should get a garden gnome to watch over them. She chuckled in agreement, and perhaps that gnome would symbolize our defiance, a tiny sentinel guarding against both clouds and conflict, holding firm against the shadows of the past. After all, what was a little petty humor against a saga of stolen sunlight transformed into something worth celebrating? With each gloaming sunset, I smiled, knowing our determination paved the way for a future where we'd all stand united, our eyes firmly set toward brighter days ahead. So, with our heads held high, we gazed toward the sunlit horizon, eager for the opportunities to bloom. As I dedicated more time to speaking about solar energy rights and neighborly support, I found myself on a path of clarity. Each day we grew our little movement in the neighborhood, and soon enough, Karen's infamy faded out while the community's spirit shone brighter. Without even realizing it, we began to change perceptions. Each time I spotted solar panels going up on homes nearby, my heart swelled with pride. Perhaps Karen and her stolen sunlight should serve as a reminder. One could only invoke shadows for so long before the light returned and laid claim to the land. But just when I thought we were finally free from her chaotic clutches, a chilling realization washed over me one crisp morning. As Emma and I sipped our coffee, I noticed a familiar figure lurking outside, a shadow cast by our past. Karen had returned. News had spread quickly through the neighborhood. The new residents of Karen's former home had witnessed her ranting about property values and solar panels, and they had quickly filled me in. She's got her sights set on a new target, one neighbor warned, shaking his head. It appeared Karen was still grappling with her obsession. I felt my chest tighten as I considered what this could mean for us and the momentum we had built. Later that week, at a gathering for homeowners interested in solar energy, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement and camaraderie. People shared stories of their solar journeys, and I took the stage to speak again, heartened by the support of friends and neighbors who had transformed their homes and lives. Just as I was starting to feel the thrill of our collective achievement, a murmur rippled through the crowd. I caught a glimpse of movement at the back of the room and froze. There stood Karen, arms crossed, with that same fiery glare I remembered all too well. My stomach knotted. What was she planning? Rather than succumbing to fear, I drew in a deep breath and continued my speech. I spoke passionately about the importance of renewable energy and community, watching as the expressions of those around me shifted from curiosity to solidarity. The energy was palpable, and I felt a surge of determination. We were stronger than Karen and her antics. After the event, I confronted her. "What are you doing here, Karen? This is about community and supporting each other, not causing trouble." She simply smirked, steadfast and unyielding. "I'm here to ask questions, to see what all the fuss is about. I just want to know how you think you can steal sunlight." Her tone dripped with condescension, but I was not going to let her bait me into a confrontation. "First of all, it's about harnessing natural energy, not stealing it," I replied, feeling a flicker of defiance. "And second, I thought you'd moved away." Her eyes narrowed. "Wherever I go, don't think I'll let you ruin the value of my property." That moment felt surreal. The audacity of her wordsmithing left me momentarily speechless. As she walked away, I resolved not to let her bring darkness back into our lives. We had fought so hard to reclaim our light, and I wasn't about to let her dim our progress. I gathered my thoughts and rallied with my fellow community members to fortify our newfound bonds. With their support, that evening we launched an outreach program aimed at helping others navigate the complexities of solar installations and HOA rules, a direct response to the chaos Karen had unleashed. We crafted pamphlets, organized workshops, and created a support network that would ensure no one felt alone in their solar journey. Days turned into weeks, and as we built this community, the stories began to flow like warm sunlight. We heard tales of fear turning into empowerment, folks standing up to their own Karens, and neighbors who had previously felt trapped blossoming in this new environment. However, it wasn't long before Karen struck back. One evening, I received a frantic phone call from one of the residents. "She's been spreading rumors," they exclaimed. My stomach dropped. Hadn't we just made tremendous strides toward healing? It turned out, she was whispering about how solar panels would lead to crippling property value decline again, planting seeds of doubt among other homeowners. Karen was trying to reposition herself as a crusader against our cause, and it was working. A few people were beginning to hesitate about making the switch. I knew we had to act swiftly. Emma and I convened an emergency meeting for everyone who had joined our movement. As the group filled the living room, I felt a wave of solidarity envelop us. "We can't let her fears reignite doubts," I declared. We have the facts, the community, and the strength of this movement. We can't lose momentum to misinformation. That night, we devised a tactical plan. Community testimonials would document our experiences and the positives of solar energy. We would create an online campaign, sharing data about energy savings, increased property values, and the environmental benefits of going solar. The darkness we felt from Karen's attempts to tamper with our vision lit a fire within us. The weeks following our initial efforts became a deafening chorus of unyielding support. Our campaign took off, with neighbors rallying around us, posting signs and sharing their successes on social media platforms far and wide. The campaign reached a crescendo, and I knew we were hitting Karen's weak spot. One crisp morning as I checked our community page, I saw a startling announcement. The town council was holding a meeting to address solar rights, focusing on how to safeguard individuals against harassment while encouraging green energy initiatives. I felt my heart race. This was our moment. But with excitement came apprehension. What if Karen showed up, armed with her same nonsensical arguments? I quickly realized that now was not the time for fear. It was time for unity. I felt a sense of determination surge within me. If we were going to stand up against Karen's chaotic energy, we needed to embody resilience with a united front. On the day of the council meeting, I arrived early, the air thick with anticipation. As I glanced around the room filled with concerned neighbors, I felt a mixture of nerves and strength coiling within me. Emma squeezed my hand, and I could tell she was just as eager as I was to squash any remnants of Karen's influence. As the meeting commenced, I stood at the podium, ready to deliver our message. The council members listened intently as I laid out the importance of supporting solar energy in our community and safeguarding individuals against harassment. With every point I made, it felt like I could hear the echoes of Karen's unsettling claims receding into the background. When I finished, applause erupted, and I caught a glimpse of Karen's face in the crowd. She was fuming, her mouth twisted in disbelief as if she couldn't comprehend the shift happening around her. I felt a swell of satisfaction. It was as if our united stand against her chaos was finally gaining ground. At that moment, I realized something profound. This was more than just a fight against one disruptive neighbor. It was about a movement that would create lasting change, a new narrative for our community. We were reclaiming not just our light, but our voices and our resilience against the shadows of intolerance. As the meeting progressed, it became evident that Karen's grasp was slipping. One by one, people began sharing their own journeys towards solar adoption, embracing the spirit of collaboration and enlightenment. I could see Karen squirming as the conversation shifted away from her old rhetoric. Perhaps more importantly, I recognized the glimmer of hope in everyone's eyes. It was a moment of community rebirth, the sunlight penetrating the cloud she had tried to cast over us. By the end of the night, the council adjourned by announcing their intention to draft regulations that would protect solar adopters, reminding everyone that progress would always shine through. As the crowd dispersed, I felt a sense of closure envelop me, a quiet resolution that had been missing for so long. We had come together, unified in our shared cause, and turned the tide against a narrative of darkness. In that moment, I could finally see a future where we continued to thrive, illuminated by the power of our commitment to one another and the energy of the sun above. Walking home that night, I took a deep breath and smiled at Emma, filled with renewed enthusiasm. This was only the beginning, but together, we had the power to light the way forward. Walking home that night, I took a deep breath and smiled at Emma, filled with renewed enthusiasm. This was only the beginning, but together, we had the power to light the way forward. As we strolled hand in hand, I couldn't shake the exhilaration of that evening's victory. It felt as though our neighborhood had shifted from shadows into a warm embrace of solidarity. But the very next morning, as the sun kissed the horizon, a new email appeared in my inbox, and my heart sank as I read the subject line, "Urgent, Karen's new tactics." Our neighbor, Tom, had contacted me, clearly worried. "She's rallying a few of the old guard to her side. I overheard her saying we need to be stopped and that our pro-solar campaign is a threat to the neighborhood," he wrote. Panic gripped me for a moment. Hadn't we just won a hard-fought battle? Why did it feel like we were entering a new phase of the war? I quickly hit reply, assuring Tom that we would be ready for whatever antics Karen had up her sleeve. We had already faced down her absurdity, and we weren't going to cower now. The community had shown up for us before, and I had faith they would again. At our next community meeting, I shared the alarming news. The mood shifted as we discussed how to counter Karen's renewed efforts. She might have been persistent, but we had a support network now, one that believed in the benefits of solar energy and the necessity of community resilience. As fear morphed into determination, we brainstormed ways to counteract her negativity. "Let's hit her where it hurts," I suggested, sparked by inspiration. We should remind everyone not only why solar power is beneficial but also how it has positively impacted our home values. We can organize a solar open house day where interested homeowners can come see our systems in action. The crowd erupted in applause. It felt invigorating to imagine dozens of families opening their doors, excited to share their success stories. We scheduled the event in 2 weeks, and with every passing day, enthusiasm built within the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Karen's subtle misconduct escalated. Whispers reached me about shady tactics she was employing. She had taken to popping into yards unannounced, stirring doubt among hesitant homeowners by making snarky comments about the supposed dangers of solar energy. I realized that we needed to be proactive, not just reactive. With Emma by my side, we decided to craft a pamphlet that included testimonials, facts, and compelling visuals. We wanted to arm everyone in the neighborhood with knowledge and paint a clear picture of the benefits. The more people knew, the harder it would be for Karen to undermine our mission. As the day of the solar open house arrived, excitement permeated the air. We had set up balloons and banners along the street, celebrating not just solar energy, but community spirit. Families poured in, eagerly asking questions and exploring the installations on each home. We had set up informative booths, showcasing how solar panels worked, including financial breakdowns and testimonies from residents. But it wasn't long before Karen showed up, eyes narrowed and calculation evident in her stride. I felt my heart race, a familiar dread crept in. This wasn't simply a matter of ignorance, she had a vendetta. As she began to slink through the crowd, her presence cast a shadow over what had been a day filled with hope and connection. I watched as her malicious comments began to stir noise among curious residents, and I knew at that moment we had to take a stand, together. I called for a gathering and stepped onto a small makeshift stage, my breath steadying as I faced the crowd. Thank you all for coming today and supporting our movement toward renewable energy. Today is not just about solar, it's about empowering each other and standing up against fear tactics like those we see from Karen. A mix of gasps and murmurs rushed through the crowd as Karen's face flushed a shade of crimson. I continued, we stand together, not only to share knowledge but to ensure our community remains free from harassment. I urge you all to speak to your neighbors, share your success, and take ownership of our journey to sustainability. The applause cascaded around me. I could feel the energy shift. People were rallying behind the concept of unity. Karen attempted to retort, but she was drowned out by ongoing cheers. One neighbor stepped forward, pointing a finger. We're not intimidated by your lies, Karen. We're forming a stronger community. She stumbled backward as the tide shifted. And just like that, the shadows were cast aside. With stories shared and doubts dispelled, I realized Karen's power stemmed from isolation, fear, and misinformation. But we could topple that foundation with connection, support, and trust. As the day ended, everyone gathered for one final toast in front of my house, thankfulness ringing through the evening air. Later that night, Emma and I reflected on everything that had transpired, excited about the positive impact we had made. But I couldn't help but remember Karen's fierce gaze, her frustrated eyes filled with bitterness. As we lounged on the back porch under the stars, my heart raced. You think she's going to accept defeat? That's the thing about bullies, Emma said thoughtfully. They don't just fade away quietly. This isn't over, she'll be back. I exhaled, knowing she was right. For now, we had forged a connection, nurtured trust within our community, and taken a monumental step forward. But Karen's return loomed just beyond the horizon, and I couldn't shake the feeling that another confrontation was imminent. Fortified by the day's success, I prepared for the battle ahead. I wouldn't let Karen dim our light again. We were in this together, fighting for something bigger than one person's unfounded grievances. It was about harnessing our spirit and the ingenuity of the people around us. As I looked down the street, I realized the sun would rise again tomorrow, a chance to shine brighter than ever before and push back against the darkness. The fight was far from over, but my heart felt steady, knowing I wouldn't face it alone. We would stand firm, united and resolute, ready to reclaim our narrative and emerge victorious over every shadow that tried to cloud our path. As I looked down the street, I realized the sun would rise again tomorrow, a chance to shine brighter than ever before and push back against the darkness. The fight was far from over, but my heart felt steady, knowing I wouldn't face it alone. We would stand firm, united and resolute, ready to reclaim our narrative and emerge victorious over every shadow that tried to cloud our path. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as the solar open house had ignited a fervor within the community. Emma and I tirelessly coordinated further informational sessions and workshops, each meeting rallying more neighbors to our cause. Every evening, families gathered at our house, sharing stories of their experiences with solar energy, pooling resources, and brainstorming ways to strengthen our movement. But Karen was far from idle. I learned through whispers that she was investigating ways to bring her fight to the local council again, aiming to stifle our progress under the guise of protecting community interests. I couldn't help but feel both anger and curiosity. What would she do next? The intensity of her energy missed the point entirely. It wasn't about keeping others from thriving, but rather about learning and growing together. One night, as we relaxed on the sofa after a long day, Emma looked up from her tablet. They're planning a community meeting next week to discuss the new regulations that protect solar installations, she said, her brows furrowed with concern. What if Karen shows up and tries to disrupt it? My chest tightened at the thought. What if she tries to persuade the council to favor her side again? This is our chance to solidify our claims and counter her arguments once and for all. We decided then and there that we would attend the meeting prepared, armed with testimonials, research, and, most importantly, support from our neighbors, who had seen the tangible benefits of solar energy firsthand. We knew the stakes were higher now. Days passed, and momentum surged as more families committed to attending the meeting. When the day finally arrived, the atmosphere was electric. The community center buzzed with chatter as we gathered, excitement and anxiety mingling in the air. I could sense the familiar flutter of nerves in my stomach, but the sight of so many united neighbors brought me reassurance. We were a formidable force. Karen was already seated toward the front when we arrived, her body language brimming with confidence that only fueled my determination. She exuded an air of entitlement, and as she lit into the council representatives, it became clear she had approached this meeting with a strategy in mind. Solar energy is a misguided obsession, she declared, her voice dripping with disdain as she turned to the council. It's a threat to our property values and the integrity of this neighborhood. I've gathered evidence that suggests many installations fail to meet safety codes. We should limit or ban these installations before it's too late. A murmur rippled through the crowd at her comments, but I wasn't going to let fear spread. I took a deep breath and steeled myself, ready to counter her claims. When the council turned to us for input, I stood up, heart pounding. Thank you for this opportunity to speak, I began, my voice steady, fueled by the faces of my neighbors behind me. What Karen may not recognize is that solar energy is not just an environmental choice, it's an economic one. It enhances property values rather than detracts from them. I shared stories of families in our community who had reaped financial rewards from their solar investments, complete with compelling data from real estate reports. In fact, homes with solar panels often see increased property values due to lower energy costs and sustainability credence. But what matters most here is how solar energy can transform our community, creating jobs, building eco-friendly practices, and contributing to our health and well-being. Throughout my speech, I could see heads nodding in agreement and whispers of encouragement spreading from my neighbors behind me. Empowered by their support, I pushed on. Our community has come together in this pursuit, sharing knowledge and resources. This is a movement fueled by neighbors supporting neighbors, not one driven by division or fear. As I concluded, applause erupted, and I felt a surge of energy. Momentum was on our side. Karen, clearly flustered, attempted to interject. You are all being misled. This is reckless behavior. Who will pay if something goes wrong? Her voice crackled with indignation, but the more she spoke, the more apparent it became that her arguments were rooted in fear, not facts. I noticed several other residents beginning to rise from their seats to counter her claims. One by one, they shared their own experiences, tales of how solar energy had provided relief from soaring utility bills and how much they had come to value their independence from fluctuating energy prices. I couldn't help but marvel at how far we had come as a community. We were connected, not just by our love for renewable energy, but by the power of collaboration and mutual support. As we rallied together, Karen's voice began to fade into the background, overshadowed by the collective heartbeat of those surrounding me. The meeting continued, but it was evident the tide was turning. I leaned on the strength and voices of my neighbors, and the council took notice. They invited individuals to approach the microphone, encouraging a discussion that opened new pathways for understanding solar energy. As the meeting finally adjourned, the council announced their intent to pass regulations that protected solar rights, effectively siding with the overwhelming consensus of the community. The cheers that erupted filled the hall, wrapping us in an embrace of triumph. As we stepped out into the fresh evening air, the weight of fear and uncertainty slowly drifted away. With our mission now firmly established, I felt lighter and hopeful for the future. But as we celebrated that night in my backyard, laughter and joy filling the spaces between us, I couldn't shake the lingering question: what would Karen do next? She had proven to be a resilient adversary, one who likely wouldn't accept defeat easily. In the back of my mind, I prepared for whatever came next. Together, we had weathered the storm and created a foundation based on unity and knowledge. Yet amidst that celebration, I knew we had to remain vigilant, ready to protect what we had fought so hard to build. But for that moment, we reveled in the brightness of our accomplishments, the knowledge that we were stronger, together, shining a light no shadow could extinguish. The sun had set that evening, but I was certain that dawn would break with even greater promise, illuminating the journey that lay ahead.